professional ethics. This is arranged into two study units in the claim textbook. Study unit 14, ethical consideration for management. There we will learn about general business ethics, moral philosophy, all those things. And then we will go into IMA Code of Professional Ethics, that is referred to as IMA SCPP. Right? IMA statement of what is it? Standard of Ethical Professional Practice. Right? We will go in detail about that. And then we have fraud and fraud risk model. That's what is covered in study unit 14. And study unit 15 we have the legislations concerning ethics, ethical consideration for the organization. Here it is corporate legislation concerning ethics. So let us go into the first study unit. You would have heard of the accountants lacking a sense of ethics. They were colluding with the management to, let me give access to some more people who have joined. They are colluding with management to. Rachna, I'm not able to give you access for both video and audio. I don't know what's happening, but I will try after some time. Okay. After risk management, this is another section where you don't need a calculator. So it is pure theory. Unfortunately, for other reasons, I couldn't sleep yesterday properly. But you should sleep properly at least for the duration of this course, because it's not so interesting. You may fall asleep. It's theory, right? So you should be careful about that. Even to teach this boring topic also, probably I would have had a better sleep yesterday, but unfortunately I didn't have. Anyway, so we will learn about business ethics, and I don't think we will be able to start IMA statement of professional ethics, professional ethical IMA statement of ethical professional practice today. I will try. Accountants have got so much. I was talking to you about that. You would have heard of accountants involved in all these scandals, accounting scandals. They are colluding with the management to reduce tax, right? Window dress the balance sheet, defrauding creditors. So many things are heard actually. So it's important that they should have an ethical sense, and this kind of ethics culture comes from the top. So a tone from the top is lacking, and there is pressure from the top on the finance professional to really behave unethically. So one should know what is right and what is wrong. Ethics is all about what is the discussion about what is right and what is wrong. What is the desired behavior and what is undesired behavior. It is like in many cases it is possible to distinguish between the so-called good behavior and decisions from bad behavior, and decisions like what is good and bad or what is right and wrong. But in certain situations it is really complicated. If you think of like using child labor for production, or discharging toxic substance into environment, paying bribes and kickbacks to customers to retain business. These are certainly unethical behavior, but it's not very straightforward when it comes to other things. So we should really know we should really know what to consider when you decide whether something is right or wrong. So you need to really know the philosophy and the ethics. So ethics, when you relate that to a business environment, that is like what is right or wrong in a business environment, that is what is called business ethics. And today's business is mostly corporate background, right? So it can also be called corporate ethics. So business ethics or ethics is a branch of philosophy. So we are going to learn some philosophy. But don't worry, when you learn anything in a very advanced way, that's philosophy. Am I not correct? If you like mathematics, after plus 2 you go for BSc mathematics. Then if you want to study further, you go for MSc mathematics. And if you study further, what you go for? MPhil. What is that? Master of Philosophy. If you still want to do further studies, what do you go for? PhD. What is that? Doctor of Philosophy. So it's all philosophy. Not only that, what is philosophy? Actually, the word philosophy, I mean, I'm not really professing something which I really don't know, but let me tell you, this word philosophy, it's written like this in Greek. It's really easy to learn how to write Greek, but you will not be able to understand anything. But you already know all the letters there in Greek, this thing, no? See, you know, pi, you know, lambda, like I, what is it, lambda, all those things you know it, but you can make sense out of it, sigma, all those things you can. So this is the way it is written, philosophia. The term philosophy is coming from philosophia. Philosophia means, sophia means wisdom, love of wisdom. Actually, this is really like this word was coined by Pythagoras in BC 570 to 495 is the period of Pythagoras. This word was probably coined by Pythagoras, but you know, like this is love of wisdom. It is not what we see as philosophy today. Love of wisdom means actually you should understand that Isaac Newton is supposed to be a physicist, right? Like he is the one who has really introduced the laws of motion, right? That's the basic of the mechanics, right? Laws of Newton's first law of motion, second law of motion, third law of motion, and then the force of gravity. All those things are the fundamentals of physics. All this theory he had written in a book in Latin. In English, the translation of that is mathematical principle of natural philosophy. So he himself did not know that he was a physicist. He was a natural philosopher, right? But some more people have joined. Let me give access to Vimal Jolie. So, everything was philosophy, right? And then from there, that means everything was about wisdom and knowledge, right? And then from there, all specialization have come. In fact, in the section 13 of his, I mean, the lives and opinions of the eminent philosophers, Diogenes, he is supposed to be the first historian of philosophy. He is giving the traditional division of philosophical inquiry into three parts. One is natural philosophy. From there only, like we have physics, chemistry, anatomy, astrology, biology, all those things will come from natural philosophy. Then moral philosophy. From moral philosophy, what do you mean actually, like moral philosophy? All the social sciences, right? But whatever is still not coming out from the philosophy is still remaining there. Ethics, aesthetics, political philosophy. Social sciences have come out from the moral philosophy, but this Moral philosophy is the predecessor for social philosophy, and what we consider today as ethics and philosophy and all, like classified into moral philosophy. Then metaphysical philosophy. This has given way to the formal sciences such as logic and mathematics. So everything was philosophy. So don't worry about we learning some more philosophy here as a part of the CMA syllabus. Uh, so moral philosophy is a branch of philosophy that contemplates what is right and wrong. It's thinking about what is right and wrong. Like you should have a consideration about what is right and wrong before you really decide anything. And moral philosophy has got three branches. One is metaethics. This is about the definition of the words. Like it's like answering the big picture questions like what is morality, what is ethics, what is justice, like that. So that is metaethics. So we will be learning some terminology that is coming from that moral metaethics portion, branch of the moral philosophy. So moral philosophy is another word for ethics, right? That is the branch of philosophy that contemplates what is right and wrong, right? So metaethics is one branch of moral philosophy where we are having all these definitions. What is what actually? The terminology, like what is morality, those kind of what do you say, like metaethics is the dictionary of ethics, right? And then another branch is the normative ethics. Somebody has enabled the audio. 1 minute, I'll tell you. John, can you disable your mute your audio? Yeah, Parvati has come just now. Nanma has come. Okay. So metaethics is giving you the definition for the terms like what is morality, like that kind of big picture questions is there. The metaethics. Then the normative ethics that provides framework for deciding what is right and wrong, right? And then applied ethics that is addressing specific practical issues of moral importance, like whether abortion is wrong, right? Can you justify abortion? Is euthanasia? What is euthanasia? Like mercy killing, no? Whether that is right or wrong? That kind of ethical questions are addressed, right? The specific practical issues of moral importance are discussed in applied ethics. So normative, so you understand what is applied ethics. Applied ethics is addressing specific practical issues of moral importance. Is euthanasia correct? Like, what is it actually like? Is abortion right? Like that. Kind of practical issues of moral importance are addressed in applied ethics. Metaethics is about big picture questions like what is morality, what is justice, what is moral due diligence, like that. You will be discussing that. Normative ethics is providing framework for deciding what is right and wrong. There are many streams of normative ethics. We will be learning some of them. So business ethics or corporate ethics are the moral principles that guide business and decision making, right? It is relatively easy in certain situations to define unethical behavior as being the wrong choice or bad decision. However, this determination may not be simple in certain situations. Different streams of moral philosophies can be used to make decision in such situations. So we will be going through some of the moral what do you say, like some of the streams of moral philosophy. Like all these things, as I told you initially, those the father of modern philosophy, you could call Socrates as the first, the father of the modern philosophy. It's all coming from the Greek philosophy. It's not that it's all like Western, but father of Western. Okay, no problem, Parvati. But can you Okay, I have network problem. Please give me a time. Okay. Parvati, can you hear me? Parvati, are you there? I didn't understand. Give you more time actually. I'm just proceeding. I didn't understand what you really wanted from me. But if you have a difficulty in connectivity, then probably the only alternative you have is to listen to the recorded class. Anyway, uh, so we will be learning. The modern philosophy has its origins in Western philosophy as well, origins in Greek philosophy. So Socrates is supposed to be the first philosopher out of that actually, and his not one of his notable students included Plato, and then the most one of the most famous students of Plato was Aristotle, and then you might be knowing about one of the most famous students of Aristotle, the Alexander the Great. So you are aware of all these things, right? So all these most of these streams of philosophy had origin from the Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all that. So we'll be going through some of the streams of what is it that the moral philosophy. First one we are going through is teleology. Actually, Aristotle is considered to be the inventor of teleology. Teleology is going from the word telos. Telos means end, goal, purpose, the consequence of something, right? Telos, right? Teleology means uh, the what the I'll talk you. I'll tell you what it is actually. I had a word in mind, but that's not coming out. See, what Aristotle, this is the way Aristotle explained. An individual is performing an action, right? And every action has got a desired consequence. Every action has got a desired consequence. So you are talking about whether this action is good or bad. An action is good or can be classified, categorized as good or bad, or right or wrong, depending on the consequence, the end, the purpose, right? That is what is called teleology. So an action is considered good or bad depending on the consequence. Every action has got a desired consequence. An action can be classified as good or bad or right or wrong depending on the consequence. That is the understanding of teleology. Understood? So it all depends on the consequence, right? The end purpose of it. If you are killing somebody so that there is a good consequence for that, then of course you can fix that. So it's like an action is considered good or bad based on the consequence or the end or the purpose of it. Here you can say the end justifies the means or that. That is teleology. Then another stream of philosophy is deontology, right? Deontology means like duty ethics. Deont means obligation or duty. Deontology is duty ethics, right? So deontology is often associated with the philosopher Immanuel Kant, right? So here, what we say is actually like if you take this model, an action can be considered good or bad based on that action itself. There are some universal set of moral principles which classify something as good or bad. killing is not correct, right? It is wrong. Whatever is your purpose. Do not steal, like you may be having, okay, you are stealing this to give it to charity or to help somebody's life or whatever, but that is idiotic. If you steal somebody's asset and then giving it to somebody who is deserving it more, then you are really a teleologist. Like you are really thinking of the end or the consequence of that, but then stealing is wrong. That action itself can be classified good or bad, right? And as a moral person, you have some duty to do the right thing, and these things are right, these things are wrong, and if you perform some actions, they are considered bad. Perform some actions, they are considered good, right? That is what is called deontology. So deontology, what would I say, like. Although not all deontologists are religious, some believe in the divine command theory. So divine command theory is what actually, like God is decreeing what is right and wrong, right? So there are some universal set of principles, but then the divine command theory say that those universal set of principles are decreed by God. Whereas Kant himself was not a religious person. Immanuel Kant, who is supposed to be person, the main person associated with the one of the first names, prominent names associated with deontology is Immanuel Kant. He was not a religious person. He was saying that man as a rational being makes some moral law universal. So there are some universal principles, whether it is decreed by God or not, there are some principles which consider an action is good or bad. You have to really go by that, and you have an obligation or duty to perform what is right, irrespective of the consequence, regardless of the end. The action itself can be considered good or bad. That is what is called deontology. But if you understand this very well, an action is classified right or wrong based on some moral principles, whether that is given by God or by man as rational being developed that universal laws, right? Then that is deontology. Beyond which duty, moral obligation to perform what is right or wrong, so that is deontology. Action itself can be considered good or bad, regardless of the consequence. But consequence or consequentialism say that an action can be termed right or wrong depending on the consequence. That is teleology. And I have told you, Aristotle cannot be called a teleologist, but Aristotle is the person who was really introduced this concept. Aristotle was not a teleologist, but he has really introduced this concept that everything has got a purpose in it. When you have a seed that has got a purpose, end purpose, that it will really come up as that tree. So there is a purpose, there is an end. And action can be classified good or bad based on that end. That is the teleology. Right? Deontology says that no, it is not the end which really define whether an action is good or bad. There are some universal moral principles which really categorize an action as good or bad, regardless of the consequence. Now, let me introduce another stream of thinking. That is actually the Socrates, Plato, Aristotle way of thinking. Actually, that is virtue ethics. Virtue ethics began with Socrates and was subsequently developed further by Plato and Aristotle. I told you, no? Socrates, Plato was the student of Socrates, and Aristotle was student of Plato. So this virtue ethics began with Socrates. I told you, as although Aristotle is the one who introduced this teleologist, Aristotle cannot be called a teleologist. I would say Aristotle was more into virtue ethics. Virtue ethics began with Socrates and was subsequently developed further by Plato and Aristotle. Here, if you take this model, you can really see you cannot call an action in itself as good or bad, or you cannot call an action good or bad based on the consequence. And you have to really see the character of the individual performance, right? An individual having wisdom knows what is right and wrong. So if you want to be good, there are some role models. You imitate them. If you are a Muslim, probably like this, what is Sunnah is what is done by Muhammad. You may not be a very good person to judge things initially, but you just imitate Muhammad Nabi. At the end, there will be a character formation, and you will become a virtuous person, right? So, like you don't need to really worry so much about what is right and wrong. Just observe some role models like Jesus Christ or Muhammad Nabi or even Narendra Modi or whoever you think as morally right. I mean, they know what is right and wrong because there is a gold, like too much of something is also bad and too less of something also is bad, right? There is a golden mean according to Aristotle. So morality stems from the identity or character of the individual rather than being a reflection of the actions or consequence of the actions. So it is morality stems from the identity or character of the individual performing that action. It is not in the action itself, it is not in the consequence of that action, right? So morality of an action stems from the character of the individual performing that action. So according to Aristotle, each moral virtue was a golden mean between two corresponding vices, one of excess and one of deficiency. Say for example, it is like too less of something is also like it's a deficiency, right? That is also a vice, and too in excess also is a vice meaning something bad, right? So too less of something, a deficiency also is something really not good, and too much excess also is not ideal. There is a golden mean between these two, right? Which only a person of that character, that virtuous behavior, virtuous character knows. He knows that. And if you don't know that, you can observe him, you can really learn. Over a period of time, you will become a virtuous person. So an action cannot be said, okay, like shouting at people is not correct actually. But when Jesus Christ shouted at people who were trading their like goods there in the temple, that was considered good because Jesus, he knows the reason, right? So an action can be considered good or bad based on the individual performing that action. That is what is called virtue. So I can give you some this more golden mean actually like so this is the virtue is in between this continuum actually like this is let me write it. This is virtue. So, according to Aristotle, each moral virtue was a golden mean between two corresponding vices, one of excess and one of deficiency. courage is a virtue, right? Courage is a virtue. But if you have too much of courage, that is considered reckless, rational. Right? Too much of courage is not good. That is reckless. That's rash behavior. But too less of courage is what? That is covered. Right? So too less of courage is called cowardice. That is a vice. Too much of courage is also not correct. If you that is too much of courage is reckless, right? Similarly, you can take any virtue. Say, for example, generosity is a virtue. But if you are too much generous, then that's like an extravagance. Like, oh yeah, you have problem? Okay, take it. Take that's extravagance. But if you have too less of generosity, that is stinginess, right? Like you are a very miserly person. Similarly, if you take modesty, modesty is a virtue. But if you have uh, too less of modesty, then you are a very shameless person, right? But if you have too much of modesty, then you are a very shy person. So excess of that virtue also is a way, and deficiency of that thing. And what is right is known to a person of virtuous character. He knows the golden rule. We cannot define that. An action cannot be termed good or bad based on the action itself, based on some moral principles, universal principles. You cannot say that. Actually, an action cannot be categorized into good or bad based on the consequence. But an action can be categorized as good or bad depending on the person performing. Whatever Muhammad Nabi does is correct. Whatever Jesus Christ does is correct. I mean, example. So you have to like, if you want to be a virtuous person, what should you do? You should identify the golden. But initially, you may be able to imitate these people role model, but you will develop that kind of character, desired character. That is the virtue. These are the three primary things there, but then under each of them, they are very, like I have already told you about the deontology. Under that, divine command theory is there. Like that, you have so many principles, and we are just limiting our discussion to what is there in the LOS. So here, there is another stream within the teleological philosophy, which is mentioned in the LOS, that is utilitarianism. That is actually a stream within teleological philosophy. What is teleology? An action can be considered good or bad based on the consequence. It's a consequentialist theory, right? Based on its end purpose, right? So utilitarianism is a stream within teleological philosophy. Here, the tradition of utilitarianism began with the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham is associated with utilitarianism. But utilitarianism was popularized by his son, his collaborator, John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill's name is what is really associated. Jeremy Bentham is the person who was really introduced this tradition of utilitarianism. It began with the English philosopher, and his secretary and his notable student and collaborator was James Mill, and his son was John Stuart Mill. So, when you talk about utilitarianism, the first name which should come to your mind is John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham is the person who introduced this concept, and John Stuart Mill was his collaborator and a notable disciple, you could say, who has popularized this concept, utilitarianism, right? So it is a branch of teleological philosophy. It is a stream within the teleological philosophy. So here, like teleology is talking about the consequence, but in that consequence should focus on the greater greater happiness for greater number of people. That is what is coming in utilitarianism. Like that end result should really encompass encompass a greater number of people and greater happiness. So if you talk about greater happiness for greater number of people, then it is focused on welfare and happiness, right? That is what is welfare in society. If you really focus on greater happiness for greater number of people, that is what we call it as welfare and happiness. So utilitarianism is very popular. It is popularized by John Stuart Mill. It is introduced by Jeremy Bentham, right? So I have told you like some names, but those names you don't need to really remember for VMA examination. But teleology, when you talk about it, Aristotle is the person who introduced that, right? And when it comes to what is it, deontology, Immanuel Kant is the person who is really associated with that. But then there are so many people after that deontology itself. They are theologians. All kinds of theology is coming within deontology because that's divine command theory. That deontology, theology is coming under, can be classified under, that stream of thinking can be classified under deontology because you're talking about some universal set of good behavior, bad behavior, what is right, what is wrong, which can ultimately determine whether you are a right person or a wrong person, everything. So it is all based on some universal set of moral principles. The action itself can be classified good or bad, but Immanuel Kant is a German philosopher who is supposed to be the one who, the first name at least, you should associate with that. Then divine command theory, so many people are associated with theological aspect of it. And the wholesale distributor of the theology nowadays is the Roman Catholic Pope. No? Anyway, you can say like that as such. So the divine command theory, that is a branch of the deontology. Utilitarianism has got many forms. Teleology has got many forms. One form is utilitarianism, which is associated with Jeremy Bentham and his collaborator James Mill and James Mill's son John Stuart Mill. So it is focusing on greater happiness from greater number of people. Let me tell you one thing. Yeah, if you really, I mean, this kind of stupidity is not a utilitarianism, but just to appreciate what is utilitarianism, I will give you some examples. Like say, for example, if you are really utilitarian, there is nothing wrong in enslaving 2% of the population for the benefit of 98% of the population. You can enslave 2% of the population for the benefit of 98%. So that means greater happiness for greater people. That is utilitarianism. Another, I mean, this is something which you can appreciate. That is welfare and happiness, you can say. But another stupid example to really appreciate utilitarianism, I would say stupid because John Stuart Mill and all were great people as such. But these are coming as examples of utilitarianism. Like say, for example, I'll tell you. You have a hospital, right? In a hall, like say. In one bed, one person is having kidney failure, he need a kidney. And another bed also, another kidney patient, he also need a kidney. Another bed, Bunyamin, okay. So that means more and more people. Bunyamin, you still have a network issue? Okay. Let me ask you, like, I am giving the lecture and then most of you are having network issue. Let me ask actually, like, can you? Okay. So most of you can hear me. I think one is still pondering. He may not be there at his seat. I mean, the point. Okay. So what I'm saying is actually you are having a hospital hall. In one bed you have a kidney patient, another bed you have a kidney patient, and one bed you have a person who need a heart transplant, another person he need liver transplant, another person need an eye operation where he need a cornea, right? So like some 7-8 people are having some needs of an organ transplant, and a perfectly healthy person walking into that hospital hall. If you are a utilitarianist, what should you do? You know it, right? So greater happiness for greater number of people. So this is the utilitarianism. It is popularized by John Stuart. It is a branch of, or it is a stream of philosophy within teleology, because it is talking about what should be the end. The end is greater happiness for greater number of people. Right? The end is something desirable, then that is teleology. But that end is greater number, is enjoyed by greater number of people, then that is utilitarian. It is focused on principles like welfare and happiness. Now we have learned in this model, if you concentrate on the individual, that is virtual things. If you concentrate on the action, that is deontology. Under this, you have all the theology, divine command theory, everything will come here. Under this, we learned now utilitarianism. Utilitarianism, right? So now we have some other terminology there in the LOS. We will go through that. That is moral relativism. Like in the deontology, you are talking about some universal set of moral principles, right? But in relativism, we say that there are no universal set of moral principles. It all depends on the context and the individual's own belief and values, right? According to him, what he has done was correct, or at least in that context, it was correct. He knows the context, and I don't know the context, right? So who am I to judge? So when you talk about moral relativism, you should really remember this phrase. Who am I to judge? That is correct according to his value system, according to his belief. Probably in that situation, that would have been the right thing. There are no universal set of moral principles like that you can follow in all situations. What is right and wrong will change based on the situation. That is what is called moral relativism. Actually, like moral relativism is there in the IMA-LOS, but the opposite of that is moral absolutism. Moral relativism means there are no things, it is all relative. Whether right or wrong, it's all relative, and it's based on one's own belief and value system. But moral absolutism says that no, there is something right and wrong, whether it is like whether you are in Africa or America, you have to wear a hijab, right? That is the thing, or whatever is it actually, you have to cover all your body if you are right there in a country where you are so much having humidity. So there are some universal set of moral principles, you have to abide by that. That is moral absolutism, right? Whereas moral relativism is actually, who am I to judge? That is correct according to his own belief. So let him be judged by his belief. That is the moral relativism. So these are the moral relativism. I cannot say that is a stream of philosophy, but that is really rejecting all this kind of stream of philosophy. So the streams of philosophy, what we have learned are utilitarianism, which is a branch of teleology, virtue ethics, and deontology. Now we will go into certain terminology like the metaethics portion. Ethics. I've already told you, ethics is a philosophical examination and understanding of what is right and wrong, or good or bad. It is theoretic, right? And morality is actually application of ethical principles. It is, I think I'm not getting a focus. Let me go into the topic, the text, and then go through that. So, although unethical business decision can often be defined, the situations are rarely as simple as the examples about using child labor is wrong, discharging toxic substance is wrong. So, but then what is right and wrong is not very clear as in these cases. There can be complex situations where you have to really decide what is right and wrong. This determination is influenced by virtues and morals, right? So here you should really understand this determination is influenced by the character of the individual who is taking that action, right? The morality of the individual, and this determination is influenced by the morals. Morals means the application of ethical principles. So, what is right and wrong is determined and influenced by the character of the person and some moral principles. So, morality means the application of ethical principles. So now you understand like why I was really going into the textbook to really see that definition. See here, the determination of what is right and wrong is based on the virtue of the individual. That is virtue. That's a characteristic of the morality of an individual. And determination of what is right and wrong is influenced by some application of ethical principle. So application of ethical principle, you know what is ethics is the philosophical examination of what is right and wrong, and that you will decide what is right and wrong, maybe based on the character of the individual, that is virtues, maybe based on the ethical principles, the application of certain ethical principles, that is morality. So morality means application of the ethical principle. Virtue means the character of the morality of an individual. I'll give you some example of that. See, like you are burning plastic in your organization. You have some plastic waste. You are burning. Whether should we burn plastic or do something else? Right? If and if there is some plastic, I mean some polythene cover and all, what is the big deal? Anyway, this environment is so much polluted. So if you leave it like that, then it will be a problem for everybody. So let us fire, I mean, burn it. So I am not really concerned about the minor thing what is happening with that. But then there is a policy that we should not pollute. I mean, there is an organizational policy. There is a guidance from the organization that you should not burn plastic. So although I am not really worried about the ethical aspect of burning plastic, I may still do that because there are some guidance regarding that moral behavior by the organization. So as a manager, I can be called a moral manager because I am applying those moral principles in that situation. What is right and wrong, I go by the moral principles and apply that, those ethical principles, and apply that in the situation. So I am a moral manager. You understand the terminology? And now think that some plastic, right? There are no guys. But still, as a person who is having a concern for the society, I decide not to burn the plastic. Then I am not applying the moral principle of the organization. I am going by my own judgment beyond what is required by me. So I am a virtuous manager. So virtuous manager, virtue means it's a characteristic of morality of an individual. Morality means the application of ethical principles. So if you take this, a manager who does not care about the environment but knows that the organization does not want to pollute, is applying the ethical standards of the organization. That manager is a moral manager, but not by definition a virtuous manager. But if in the absence of some ethical standards of the organization also, if that manager is going beyond those moral principles and then applying his personal virtues, he is a virtuous manager. So you understood the difference between morality and virtue. Then another terminology which you should understand is justice. So in the meta ethics, like when they are trying to give, you should understand what is justice. But it's a very confusing word. Every individual should be given what he or she deserves. That is what is so he is served justice then, right? Whatever he is deserving, if he is given, then justice is served. Equal should be treated equally and unequal should be treated unequally. So what is it actually? Is justice about equality, or justice about fairness, or is justice about what getting what we deserve, or is justice about getting what we need? There is no end to that discussion. There are 5 sons in a family, right? And mother is making 10 idlis. A person who is believing in equality say that, oh, let me have it as 15 idlis. You know, like now idli is too small. No? 15 idlis. So a person who believes in equality say that 3 idlis is to each of the sons. But then one person actually requires only 2 idlis. Anything more than that, he will have problem with his stomach. But whereas another person, another son, his 3 idli is nothing for him. Actually, he needs at least 5 idli, right? So is justice like how the justice is like? Okay, the person who actually require only 2 idli, give 2 idli to him. Is that justice? Is it justice is getting what we need, or justice is about equality? Like that. So we really have confusion there. Justice is understood in different ways, but one way to really see justice as creating a level playing field, like everybody is getting equal opportunity. That is justice. Another, yeah, that is one way of looking at it. Ancient Greek understanding is justice is harmony. A just society is one in which everyone fulfills their roles so that society runs smoothly. So justice as equality you can understand, need-based justice, merit-based justice. So justice could be used in different ways within the society. You have heard of social justice. That means equal opportunities, like regardless of the race, gender, religion, all that, you are giving equal opportunity, right? But then, yeah, most common view may be a social justice. But then don't you have to really give preservation? Is that not an impediment to the social justice? Right? So there comes restorative justice. So people are really thinking about like uh, making good for what they have suffered in the past, right? The crime hurts and justice should heal. So they were discriminated in the past, right? So they should be brought to the same level as the other people in the society. You should restore what they have lost. And then only you can talk about social justice, equality. So that is restorative justice. And then when you distributive justice, like asset allocation should be equal, like, so that is another terminology. Then another thing is retributive justice, like if if you have done something wrong, you should be punished. So that's a lesson for others, right? So like rewards and punishment and all, like it's retributive justice, more into punishing individuals for doing something wrong. That is justice, right? So there are various ways of looking at justice, right? So that is something you should understand that. And then another word often used as a synonym or used confused or with justice is fairness. Fairness means applying the same rules, standards, or criteria without personal bias. That is what is fairness. So fairness also is seen as leveling the playing field. A fair person gives equal opportunity for everything. A fair person is impartial, right? A fair person, he will not have any, what do you say, like consideration for his benefits as such. He will really be impartial and then he will apply the same rules in similar situations. Whether his son is coming there or his relative is coming there, the criteria is applied without any personal bias, right? And a fair person will give all information possible, like whatever is needed. Actually, he will not be trying to manipulate certain situations, right? So that is fair. Then another terminology is integrity. Integrity is an individual's internal compass that guides behavior. Like a person of integrity does what he or she says, right? So that means a person of integrity walk the talk, like he will do what he says. So like when you talk about like person of integrity, you can see honesty, truthfulness, all those things as ingredients leading to his integrity, right? So he upholds ethical standards and he is incorruptible, right? That is integrity. The person of integrity will uh, really will really do what he says. Actually, he is a man of principles, right? That those principles include certain virtues, like I'll just go into that textbook version of it, it is better there. Often, core principles of integrity are virtue, compassion, honesty, loyalty, and objectivity. So, an individual's internal compass that guide behavior is integrity. Integrity in the workplace means a person does what she or he says. He or she walks walk the talk. So what he says he will do. That is it. So within business ethics, one who acts with integrity upholds ethical standards, and that person of integrity is incorruptible. Right? That is the meaning of integrity. And another terminology is due diligence. What is due diligence? Like you go for when you go for mergers and acquisition, you will go for due diligence, right? Like you give consideration for all the factors, what can go wrong, what cannot go wrong, like that, what could come to as pros and cons, everything, all factors, all kinds of potential risks are assessed in a due diligence. So a thorough evaluation of an organization or an individual to assess potential risk is what we call as due diligence. So an ethical due diligence should be considered by organization. Without knowing business partners, an organization cannot uphold its own ethical standards. So you should really consider the environment, who are the partners. So there should be moral or ethical due diligence. This is actually considering all factors to really see what are the potential risks facing the organization. Right? That is due diligence. Then another terminology is fiduciary responsibility. Fiduciary responsibility means the legal responsibility to act solely for the best interest of another is what we call this fiduciary responsibility. You would have heard of this term when you were learning the Companies Act, no? Right? There the board of directors owe a fiduciary duty to the organization. What do you mean by that? The board of directors, as individual directors, not board of directors, the individual directors owe a fiduciary duty to the organization. Means they have a legal responsibility to act solely for the best interest of another. Meaning, if there is a conflict of interest, they should act in the best interest of the organization. Like, say for example, if the organization is trying to buy some property, you are there in a committee which is really vetting this property. So as a person who is involved in that decision, you come to know of all the properties available for purchase there in that locality, and you are also looking for some property, right? So once you know it, you know that okay, your organization will take its own time. By that time, somebody else would be buying. You are also a prospective buyer, right? So there is nothing wrong in buying that property for yourself, because instead of you or for the organization, somebody else would be buying that property. But you owe a fiduciary duty means actually fiduciary responsibility means you have a legal responsibility to act solely for the best interest of that organization. So you should not be buying that property before getting the consent from the organization that the organization is. So the first right of refusal you should get from the organization. So when there is a conflict between the personal interest and the business interest, a person truly understands fiduciary responsibility, he will weigh whether he owes a fiduciary responsibility to that entity or not. If he owes that, he should really consider that responsibility over and above his own personal interest. This can come not only for an individual, even for organization, because the organization also might be acting as trustee for some other beneficiary. So there, the fiduciary responsibility should be really preventing them from acting in their interest, and they should act in the interest of the beneficiary. That is the fiduciary responsibility. It is difficult to take such decisions, but the individual's the ethical sense should guide him in considering the interest of the other party before the interest of before his own interest, right? So decision to act in another's best interest may be difficult and not beneficial to the organization or the individual called upon to act, but the moral and ethical standards should guide them to do it. So we have gone through all the meta-ethical terminologies also here. So let me just turn through the pages here and then see whether I have covered everything or not. So business ethics is ethics. So ethics is a branch of philosophy, I said, which is concerning what is right and wrong. When you apply that ethics into a business situation or decision making in a business situation, that is business ethics. And businesses are in the corporate form, so they are incorporated. So a synonym for business ethics could be corporate ethics. So the business ethics is about distinguishing what is right and wrong, and what is right and wrong is relatively simple in most of the situations, but there are situations where you will have difficulty. Right? I'll tell you one example as there is time. Uh, Say you are the driver of a train, and this train is going like this, and you would have heard of this case. This is a moral dilemma, often cited by many. So this can take this turn, or this can take this turn, and then finally it will come to the same. Normally, the train takes this route, and knowing that this is the route, like this train is supposed to take this route, but then there is an alternative path also. This is not the allowed track, and one small boy is playing here in this track because he knows that the train doesn't come this way. But here some 20 kids are playing. Right? So 20 kids are playing. So you are the driver. So you should take the train to this way, or you should pull the lever and then uh, turn the train to this way. So there are moral dilemmas actually. Probably if you take the pull the lever and take the train here, as you have killed that boy, and then as a driver you had the responsibility to go by this. This was the official uh, instruction given. But if you take this, you will be killing 20 kids. But then they were violating the rules there. They were not supposed to play on the track. Right? They were not supposed to play because it is a railway track. But then 20 kids are playing volleyball there or football there. But here there is only one small boy playing, a law-abiding citizen, knowing very well that the train doesn't come that way. But then you can pull the lever. If you don't pull the lever, you will be killing 20 kids. And here, if you pull the lever, you will be killing one kid. What should you do? There are no right answer or wrong answer. You have to think what is right and wrong. Then this kind of moral philosophy, the frameworks probably might help you. If you believe in divine command theory, probably you can pray and then take a decision. Eh? I don't know. What I'm saying is actually you don't come across the situation as a general rule, but there can be situations. Most of the business decision, you know what is right and wrong. You should have an ethical sense. Right. But there are situations like this. The moral philosophy is the branch of philosophy that contemplates what is right and wrong. Moral philosophy consists of different concepts and streams of thought about how to perceive right and wrong. And in the what do you say, like in the distinguishing the terminology part of it, actually probably some of you might, even I was personally finding difficulty to distinguish between uh, morality and ethics. So morality and virtue. Moral virtue. So here you are having a sentence to really the determination of what is right and wrong. Where is that actually? Yeah. The determination of what is right and wrong is influenced by virtue and moral. So this should really help you to apply that knowledge here. Morality is application of ethical principles. It is theoretical. Virtue is characteristic of morality of the individual, right? So determination is influenced by the character of individual, and the ethical principles. So application of ethical principle is what we call it as morality in a given situation. Application of ethical principle in a given situation is what we call it as morality. If you still find it difficulty, you can remember that moral manager, he is applying the ethical principles of the organization in that plastic burning situation, right? So he is a moral manager. He is governed by morality. Morality means the ethical principles. But to understand the virtue, the character of the morality of an individual, you can take the same example and then say that there are no moral principles for this burning plastic there in the code of conduct of the organization, but he is a virtuous person, he knows what is right and wrong. So that is virtue. So what is right and wrong is normally influenced by the morals or the morality, by the ethical principles of the organizations or the codified ethical principles, or by the virtues of that. Teleology, I can read what is written in the textbook. The business decision should be moral. However, different moral philosophies can be used to make those decisions. Moral philosophy can be divided into few main streams related to business ethics. One is teleology. From this perspective, everything is a function of its end, purpose, or goal. Right? So, what is the word I give you? Consequentialist. One more terminology: end, purpose, goal, or consequence. Right? The moral good is derived from what is achieved and whether the consequence of an action are considered subordinate. The moral good is derived from what is achieved, right? The end, and whether the consequences of an action are considered good or bad. That is it. So based on that, an action itself is classified good or bad is what is called teleology. The teleological implications for business ethics is that the effects of decisions on multiple stakeholders should be taken into account. So when you take an action, how it affects people, and based on that, you should be taking an action. That is what. So what is the end result of that? Based on that, you will take a decision. Means you are a teleologist. Utilitarianism is this theory values maximizing positive effects such as welfare or happiness. The morally right decision is the one that maximizes these positive effects. The general principle is that greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. That is the measure for right or wrong decision. Utilitarianism is a stream within teleological philosophy. The difference between teleology and utilitarianism is that the teleology focuses on the outcome in general, whereas the utilitarianism is focusing on greater good for greater number of people, right? So that means actually utilitarianism focus on welfare and happiness, greater good for greater number of people. So teleology and its branch utilitarianism is known. Then deontology, what is good or right is derived from the action itself, regardless of the consequence. So you should, like, it is not the end, the means itself are really important. What you do, right? So the good or I mean good or bad or right or wrong is derived from the action itself, regardless of the purpose or regardless of the consequence, regardless of the end. In deontology, a decision is right if it allows a moral rule or law, even if the consequence of the decisions are bad. Deontology and teleology are opposites. You can really see that. One is on the means, the other is on the end. So they can be understood as opposite, right? Then virtue ethics, a decision is right if a virtuous person would do the same in the same circumstance. That is virtue ethics, right? A virtue ethics is focused on individual, not on the action. Deontology, if you Virtue ethics is focused on the individual. Deontology is focused on the action. Teleology is focused on the outcome. So you remember that diagram which I had drawn? Individual, action and consequence. If you focus on the individual performing that action, it is virtue ethics. If you focus on the action itself, that is deontology. If you focus on the end or purpose or consequence, then it is teleology. So that is what we have seen. Then, so we have learnt three streams and one branch of teleology. Then all these have got nothing actually. Relativism or moral relativism claims that no universal set of moral principles exists. In relativism, a decision is right if it is based on what appears to be right or reasonable within one's own belief or value system. So he is right according to his own situation, and what he thinks is right. Who am I to judge? I don't know his situation, right? That is the moral relativism. So I gave you like opposite of that could be moral absolutism. Then I have gone to a confusing concept justice. It means different things to different people, right? Uh, so based on that, you could call social justice. This social justice means everybody deserves equal economic, social, political opportunities irrespective of gender, race, religion. You cannot say that is correct. Everybody deserves equal economic, social, political opportunities irrespective of gender, race, religion, etc. No. Based on religion, you are having reservation, and based on the gender, you are having reservation, right? And based on the age, you are giving special consideration to people. So this is not like you cannot understand this as very tight rules. So different types of justice you need to use. This is social justice. Everybody deserves equal economic, but then people who are in a very weak situation, they should be empowered so that you can really have social justice. So that is restorative justice, right? Once you have all these things, then you can think about distributive justice, right? And even then, actually, if you really want to encourage good behavior and discourage bad behavior, then you should really go with retributive justice, really as like you should execute people